Communism in North Korea. Some of you may have seen me do Complete History of Communism Part 1, which is, of course, Karl Marx and the writing of the Communist Manifesto. Then there's Complete History of Communism Part 2, which is the Paris Commune of 1871. Complete History of Communism Part 3, the Russian Revolution of 1917 and the events which followed. And then there's Complete History of Communism Part 4, which is Communism in China, which brings us right up to Part 5. Korea is a mid-sized land, surrounded by China and Russia and Japan. A humble nation surrounded by three mighty forces. Long ago it was known as the Hermit Kingdom, isolated from the world but self-sufficient. Korea had its own language and inventions and resources. But when the rest of the world reached colonial times, Europe and Japan both wanted that colonial prize. East and West wanted Korea. Who would win? It was Japan that annexed Korea in 1910, and life under the Japanese was cruel, but Korean landlords and police helped them rule. The vicious imperialists and the richest Koreans collaborated. And the first Korean communist was a woman in Russia, Alexandra Kim. She was killed, but a few Koreans joined in. Maybe communism could get rid of the Japanese they all hated. And the Korean Communist Party was just a few people at best. One was Kim Song-ju, a teenage student who got arrested. When Kim got out, he fled and joined Mao's Chinese army. He fought in China, not Korea, but he fought the Japanese. So a legend spread back in Korea about a Korean army commander in China. Kim Il-sung, meaning become the sun, became the new name of this star. And when Kim was the last commander alive in his section, and the Japanese had his troops down to a fraction, he led his last men to safety across the river to the USSR. And so the next chapter in Kim Il-sung's life began. He left Mao's army and was retrained as a Soviet army man. He fought in Stalin's army through World War II, and when the Japanese were crushed, it was Korea's dream come true. But like Germany, after the Nazis were finished, Korea was also in question with the Japanese vanished. Would it be the communist East or the capitalist West that would give them direction? So just like the new East and West Germany, a similar decision fell to cut Korea in half along the 38th parallel. The North to Stalin's Russia, the South to America's protection. Stalin picked Kim Il-sung to be the leader in the North. Sigmund Rhee was the South's leader that America put forth. And through the late 40s was a propaganda fight. Both called the other one a puppet, and both were sort of right. Well, one big problem with North Korea, to be fair. There were very few Korean communists even there. The leaders were mostly foreigners from China and the Soviet Union. And then on the other hand, one big problem with South Korea, to be fair, was that America put back in power all the rich Koreans there. The bad ones who collaborated with Japan came right back to rule them. And another irony is that Korea did have its own communist party, but they were based in the South, where they just couldn't get things started. Meanwhile, both leaders were like pawns hoping to be kings. Both wanted permission to attack the other and conquer everything. In 1950, Kim got Stalin's permission, sent the North Korean troops across the border on a mission. The South Koreans fled, just like Kim hoped was gonna happen. But Kim underestimated how much America was committed. He thought the U.S. wouldn't send troops to Korea, but they did. So it was his turn to flee back north, because it was America's excuse to see him flattened. But then it was quickly America's turn for a disastrous turnabout. We hadn't thought the giant communist Chinese army would come out. So the Korean War was really Americans versus Chinese, with Korea in the crossfire of this mini World War III. Well, we reinforced with new technologies like napalm, but the Chinese seemed endless. There was talk of using an A-bomb, and for 3 awful years there was slaughter and no one winning. So America and China both backed off because they were even, but with millions of Koreans dead and cities destroyed for no reason, the country was divided exactly the same as at the war's beginning. And Kim still wanted more power, but still needed Russia and China's help. The only rivals he could get rid of were Korean communists themselves. He told everyone to believe in Juche, his philosophy of self-reliance, and he did improve North Korea's economy and science. So North Korea did prosper for a time, but by the 70s it started to decline. Old Kim picked his son, Kim Jong-il, to lead in case of his departure. North Korea even started nuclear power programs, but the economy just kept slowing and slowing. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, they lost their most important partner. And just like a metaphor for the growing problems of his past, old Kim grew a neck tumor they had to crop from photographs. In fact, it grew so large and got in fist fights with his kid. Okay, that didn't really happen, but it would have been crazy if it did. Nowadays, North Korea is a hermit kingdom once again, ruled by Kim Jong-il and his army men, isolated from the world, but even worse than they had been in the past. But if North Korea can continue to get rid of its nuclear programs tomorrow, it can still be an example for the world to follow. Maybe sanctions will lift, the people will rise and make their own fate at last.